Alright, so really quick, I just want to show y'all in paper form my Footbox design that I did that worked for me. It was easy enough. There's probably some easier way. I started to reach out in the forums last night and ask, but I got antsy and I just wanted to fiddle and I did this and it worked, so that's fine. But my guess is somebody will pipe in and say, yeah, you did it the hard way or something, and tell me what I did wrong. But anyway, I thought I might share in case it is a good way of doing it, and or to stimulate others to say a better way. So I want to make a box. I don't want it to make just a pillow that is essentially spherical or flattened around the edges. I wanted to make just like a mini version of my quilt to sort of plug into the end of the foot box and just sew the outer hem of the box to the hem of the end of the quilt, so it just kind of plugs in there. And even though you sew through the hems and not the quilt, and so it's a continuous insulation layer. And so how do I make the box? I kind of scratched my head for a while and thought how to do that, and this is what I came up with. And I'm not an engineer, not very original, but I basically at first I thought of this basic idea of creating a box, and I cut this shape so that when you sew it together, you create that box like that. I'm doing this with one hand, so you'll have to just pardon me. And so that's that. And the important thing is planning the dimensions right. I'm not sure I did it exactly right, but I basically measured the length of the width, I measured the width of the foot end of the quilt, right? At the end result. Don't do this early when you're making the quilt based on calculations, because what you actually get in the end may be different. So at the very end of you making the quilt, the body of it, and it's sewn up, measure actually one of my ends was a little bit more narrow than the others, so I used the narrower end. It was like 46.5 inches, which kind of surprised me, but that was fine. And so I used that number and then divided it by 4 and got I think something like 11 7/8 inches about. And then that was like this dimension of this inner square, pretty much. And then these would be the baffle height, these tabs. So it'd be 2.5 inches in my case. That's at the loft I wanted. And then you would need to add for hem a seam allowance for this part here, to where it comes up here. All these sides come up, and you would need an allowance of hem to attach to another piece. And so that I used 1/2 inch. Probably now that I've done it, I would suggest doing 1 inch. It'll be easier. The sewing it onto the part will be a little easier, but it still worked. And that's that. I thought about trying to work in a seam allowance here for when I sew these two sides up, but it ended up complicating the design, and I realized that I'll have a tiny little bit of loss when I sew these two sides together, but it wasn't a problem. I cut my baffles. These are little mock-up baffles of the length. I cut them to the length of the 11 7/8, but I added an extra 1/8 of an inch to each end, so 1/4 inch total, to each end, so as to allow me to sew. Actually, these should be taller, but I've ruined the scale. These should be the same height as the 2.5 inches of this, but anyway, it's just for show. But so these have to sew both to the body of this, but they have to sew up the side of this part of it. And so I added a little extra 1/8 to provide a little tab that could easily kind of, like that, sew to the up the side of the wall. And Wonder Tape, man, it helped a lot in sewing these little edges and corners and this stuff. With the Wonder Tape, the job was just simple, just easy. Without it, it's just a total pain. So get you some Wonder Tape for this part, I believe, but it's doable without it. But anyway, I sewed up the sides first. I probably could have sewn on the baffle material first. That might have been a little bit easier, but I sewed up the sides first by just bringing them together and using that Wonder Tape and just putting them barely together. That 1/8 of an inch wide is about how wide that Wonder Tape is anyway, and put them together. But I did it inside out, so I created a French seam and turned this whole thing inside out and sewed the French seam on each of these using the Wonder Tape. So then it created the box, and then I had marked my spots before that run the full length that spaced them out. I had 2 baffles, 1, 2, like that, don't. And then I marked them, and then I used the Wonder Tape to place them, and then just basically sewed the full length, and then used the Wonder Tape to that was a little tricky to fix the sides of the little bit of 1/8 of an inch at the end along the top. You have to kind of bend and work it. That's where the Wonder Tape really helped, and that was easy enough. Then you have the whole box made with the baffles in it, and you have your extra seam allowance for all these parts here. This other piece I had cut to be 11 7/8, but I wanted a large 1 inch 1 inch extra to be a big sort of the resultant larger, tab that would allow me to that would be wider than this base. This is going to end up being about 11 7/8 when I'm done with the box like this. Well, this, when I'm done hemming it onto this, hemming this onto this, or sewing this onto this and hemming it over, would be maybe 1/2 an inch of a tab all the way around. So do your math and make it to where this is a little bit larger, so that when you're done and this goes on to this, it will be larger. Well, you get the drift, maybe, I don't know. So when you're done, it's larger. See, it is a little bit larger. You can see I cut this to be that way, just the paper here. And then you just use this extra seam allowance to sew it down, and then you roll hem the edges all the way around. And I leave one side up top that has the baffles running down open, and stuffing it was a pain. I mean, it wasn't a pain. I just had a little bit of mess. It wasn't that bad. I used probably too much down too. I calculated how much I needed. It was like 0.4 ounces, but I'm pretty sure I used 3/4 of an ounce. I wanted the Footbox to be really extra warm, and I'm not sure if I'll regret that. I could actually come back and remove some of the down if I needed to, if it was too hot. But I think it'll work out really well. So I'm not sure if that helps. Also, provide some pictures, and any questions, let me know.